Good afternoon.
Hi.
Thank you for joining me tonight for another important conversation. My name is Dr. Regina Hill, and we will be discussing white mothers raising Black babies. Now, listen, I'm out of breath. Let me catch my breath. Whew. I have to be my own producer tonight because my husband is away out of town. So I had to run, hit live, and run back. So, woosah, I'm going to catch my breath. But thank you, ladies, for joining me. I'm really excited about this conversation. I think it's very important. Since I posted it on social media, it's received a lot of shares and I've got a lot of inbox, a lot of new friend requests because people don't want to miss this conversation. So thank you for being willing to share your perspectives, your experience about what it's like being mothers raising Black children during this climate. So I'm going to introduce my panelists. First up is Tracy Warhop. She is a business owner, entrepreneur in South Bend. She has been married for over 10 years with two beautiful children. Welcome, Tracy.
Thank you.
Then we have Rosie Seagrave. She was born in Southern California and lived in the Midwest for 12 years. She currently resides in Phoenix with her husband Adam and two daughters, Olivia and Summer, and their dog, Frankie. Welcome, Rosie.
Thank you.
And then we have Amber. She is an assistant professor and newly appointed chair for the psychology department at Bethel University. Congratulations.
Thank you.
She has been married to her beloved husband for 14 years and has two children, ages 10 and 3, who are her greatest joy and passion. So I want to jump right on in because I have a lot of questions. And for this show, this was the most questions I've ever had for any of my panelists. So I want to make sure we get through them all because they're so good. But as a disclaimer, I do want to mention that for the purpose of this interview, I will be using the terms adopted and biological. And I just want to make sure that you all know that Rosie and Amber see their adopted children as their own children, but for the purposes of this interview, I'm using those terms, okay? So I don't want you guys in my inbox or in there saying, why are you calling them your adopted children? You should love them as your own. They do. For the purpose of this interview, I am using those terms to differentiate the topic, okay? You guys ready?
Let's do it.
So this question is for Rosie and Amber. So you two have adopted two children. Amber, you have a beautiful little boy, and Rosie, you have a gorgeous daughter. And during the application process, it's very rigorous, and you were given the option to express a willingness to adopt a child based on ethnicity of the birth parents, or you had the option of selecting any. How did you prepare yourself and your family to adopt a child from a variety of racial backgrounds?
Okay, I'll start. So our agency did a very good job of kind of helping to prepare us. They held lots of workshops, seminars. They had speakers come in, and they did some really good exercises, required literature. They had one activity, which was really kind of eye-opening for me, and it was they had us raise our hand, whoever had been in a room where they were the only person of that race. So the only white people in a building or a theater or, anywhere where we were the only white people. And we had done that. We had been to a church service where we were, I think, the only white people there. And they said, think about how you felt when you were in that room and realize that your child is going to feel that way all the time if you adopt transracially. And so it kind of just really gave us some food for thought. And they gave us, some really good required literature that we read, but then it was kind of a starting point for our own self-reflection and our own desire to research, learn, talk to people. So it was kind of a variety of things, but they gave us a good starting off point for sure.
Amber?
Yeah, when we were first getting started, what I recall many years ago was frankly just a lot of reading. At that time, I think that's all we knew to do. Now, I think we know a little bit better, and there are other things I wish we would have done to better prepare. But our agency, I think, could have beefed that up a little bit more, to be frank. I think that offering, a reading list is a great starting point, but I think it's incredibly insufficient. And I think that that's something that really needs to improve within foster care and adoption. And from what I'm seeing for folks that are maybe just now starting with training pieces, it looks like that's starting to get better. But when we first started, I can't say that it was really all that stellar. And there was a lot of self-learning that had to become necessary in addition to what the adoption folks provided for us.
Thank you. So here's this other question. Because you have Black children, do people assume that you have a white savior complex?
You want me to start with this one, Rosie?
Sure. I'll go next.
It's hard for me to know always what the lens of other people are. And as odd as this may sound, regarding whether people might think I have a white savior complex or not, I actually really welcome that skepticism or that concern, because to me, it shows that they're concerned for my son, right? So as a mom, I welcome that. And I think everybody has blind spots. No matter how much work you've done, no matter how much you've read, every single one of us has blind spots somewhere. And so I really welcome any kind of question or skepticism about that, because it makes sure that I'm being accountable to looking for any tiny morsel, right, that might be hidden within me that needs kind of unearthed and scraped up and cleaned up. And if that helps me be a better parent to my son, that I welcome that question. I don't think that we did, but at the same time, I think a lot of people don't know what their blind spots are, right? And so I welcome that skepticism, but I guess I don't really know what everybody thinks about me in that regard, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so too. I haven't directly experienced that, but I have seen people putting that on as a positive thing. So, for example, it was very eye-opening for me when we were in the hospital with when our daughter was born, and seeing how the white nurses treated me like a white savior versus how they treated her birth mother, who deserved so much more than what I was getting. And they were so gracious and kind and loving to me. And the complete opposite to her, someone who had just given birth and was doing maybe one of the hardest things she's had to do in her life, give up her child. And they treated me, giving me blankets, water, whatever I needed, and really kind of disregarding her. And that was very eye-opening to me. And not only was it sad and anger-inducing and frustrating to see her birth mother treated that way, but I was also really sad because I was seeing kind of for the first time how my daughter was going to potentially be treated in life. So that was kind of the first kind of exposure to the white savior concept that I saw.
That was good, Rosie. Thanks for sharing that. Tracy, so this next question is for you. You married a Black man, and love is love. You can't help who you fall in love with. And I know you guys had talks before you got married about your family and wanting to expand. How did you prepare yourself as a white woman, knowing that you were going to give birth to biracial children who, within the context of the US, would be considered Black? How did you prepare yourself?
Yeah, that's so true. I think for me, it started even before I was married, before I got married. It had to start with having a boyfriend who was African-American and understanding what he went through as a child, as a teenager, as an adult. seeing what his life was like. And I think that gave me a little, that obviously was a start to understand what it was going to be like for a son or anyone in that circumstance. And so definitely started before I was married. And then when we had children, it was really trying to, of course you try to educate yourself and you try to understand what it's going to be like. You can ask questions, but no one's situation is exactly like your own. And so it was just a lot of, talking to my husband about what we're going to deal with and what we're going to see as a couple, what we're going to hold on to, what we're going to have to deal with for our children. But so just becoming aware of more and more, and then you learn with experience too. As it happens, you learn.
Yeah, that's good. And I love the insight that you said this process started before you got married. It was about falling in love with your husband. I was at a conference and there was a Black woman speaking. She was in an interracial relationship. And she said before she could marry her husband, she knew she had to fall in love with his people and that he had to fall in love with her people too. And so I think that's very important. And to have those open and honest conversations about what it's going to look like for us to be an interracial couple in this country and what it's going to look like for us to have children. I think that is so good that you guys had those open and honest discussions to prepare you for what you're living in right now.
Yes, exactly.
Amber, this question is for you. So some white adoptive parents have never engaged in anti-racist work or conversations. Some apply the colorblind perspective to race when it is easy, when they don't experience oppression, they experience privilege. And this can be very dangerous for children being adopted into families who are ill-equipped and unwilling to acknowledge the ways their children will experience the world in their Black bodies. Can you speak to the dangers of white parents not engaging in the internal and personal anti-racist work necessary for adopting not only a Black child, but other children of color?
Woo! We could do this one for like 3 Thursdays, I think, right? I do. So I'm going to come out hot with this one a little bit. This is something I've grown to be very passionate about. But I really, really believe that white parents who are refusing to acknowledge racism or are living in this color blindness, I don't see race kind of environment, are actually engaged in an active act of violence and neglect towards their children. Not teaching Black children about the reality of race in the world that we live in has the potential to be deadly for them. If you're raising children and this is not a conversation that you're having as a white parent, you are setting them up to potentially be in really dangerous situations. If you're a white parent and you've never heard of the talk before and you don't think you need to have that talk with your children, you are harming your children. And that's something that really ticks me off, because in every other avenue, if a parent was neglecting or harming their children, everyone would be up in arms about it, right? If this analogy totally breaks down, by the way, so let's not take it too far, but let's say a child had a medical condition. It impacted them every single day. Maybe like diabetes, right? Every single day, you have to check your sugar, you have to know what you're eating, you have to pay attention to your body. And if a parent said, let's just wing it and see what happens. Let's not get the education about this medical condition. Let's not learn how to navigate life with this condition. That's deadly. And in medical neglect, then we'll get you arrested, right? But not engaging in racial education as a white parent, instead of medical neglect, it's social neglect, and it's equally deadly.
That's so good. So good. I love that. You told me that was gonna be your question. That was gonna be your one.
you can't ignore it. You cannot ignore it. And if you want to ignore it, you have no business adopting or fostering children who are a different race than you.
So this next question is for all of you. How do you navigate conversations with relatives who believe racism doesn't exist or exhibit racist behaviors?
Well, no one in my family has exhibited like overt racist behavior, thankfully. Definitely a lot of not all of my family, but a lot of family members on both sides aren't as passionate about racial justice as we are, or don't see systemic racism as being very present. So definitely downplaying it. And that's difficult because I'm not going to stop harping and trying to educate. And as annoying as it can be, we owe it to our daughter for her family members to be as aware as they can be, because it's her family. And you know, with literature, documentaries, conversations, you just can't really stop. You have to be annoying and really have those conversations for their sake.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, Tracy, did you have something? I don't want
No, go ahead. I'll go next.
to, you know, I jokingly were like, see you later. Like, but in all seriousness, if we did that with everybody that was resistant towards learning and growing, then that doesn't create a better future for our children. And so I do believe, in all seriousness, if someone's willing to engage in the conversation, even if they're itty bitty baby steps, brand new to their own growth, brand new to maybe uncovering their own implicit bias that maybe they didn't realize was there, I'll talk for hours with somebody and read books with you and talk to you and whatever it takes to get you there. If it helps make our community better for everybody, let's go there. However, at the end of the day, if it's somebody maybe, and this is hypothetical in case anyone in my family's watching, but you know, if there's somebody that is just unwilling to engage in the conversation, somebody that's like, this isn't a problem, it's being blown out of proportion. We've seen it on social media, like some of the extreme nonsense. Honestly, I don't have time for that. You know, and if that's where someone's going to live, that is their choice, but they don't get the privilege of having my family and my son in their life. And at the end of the day, my children come first. And my family and my support system, if we're adoptive parents, Rosie and I, you know, we obviously don't think that family is always blood, right? And so if some of my blood family has to step aside for other non-blood family to come in and be our support system and to be our family, then so be it. I need to make sure that my son is protected and cared for and supported as a young Black man, because he's not going to be 3 forever. He's not going to, you know, look like cute and innocent forever. And, you know, there are going to be people that may judge him, and he has to have support systems in place that are going to understand that. But luckily, I'm very, very, very blessed that that our family is tremendous. Racism really ticks them off, you know, and so we have a very supportive system. But at the end of the day, you know, there's always extended folks out in the edges, and if they show themselves, I'm actually kind of grateful for that, because then I know the truth and they're not hiding in the closet as racist. So when they show us who they are, that's good to know.
Maya Angelou says, when someone shows you who they are, believe them.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tracy, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think these most recent events have definitely made people more aware, especially family members more aware. And sometimes it's frustrating, because I would always sit back and be like, but why weren't you aware like 10 years ago or 20 years ago? Why is this making you aware now? But every opportunity is a platform to talk to someone. And I'm kind of like you, where, you know, sometimes you want to be like, bye, okay, if it's not your concern. But it is important to have those conversations when they're difficult. They need to happen in order to grow, even if, you know, it's extra energy and extra effort. And, you know, you can't open someone's eyes, do not make a real effort to help them to see over time. Their baby steps. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, that all of a sudden they realize what's really going on. Yeah. But you can step by step really try to help these people to understand. And like, my family's not extremely, you know, aggravated or, you know, concerned about these events near like the way we are in our own household. You know, it's a conversation every single day. In their household, They might have seen what's on the news once or discussed it, but it's not, of course, near on the level that we are, but it's baby steps every little bit. And that's family and friends around you. It's everybody, it's the community, it's the people who are seeing your children every single day that can also stand up for them and help too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so important. Amber, this question is for you. Because you and Rosie are raising Black children, and Tracy, you're raising biracial children, the kids are going to be faced with not fitting in, feeling like I don't fit in with Black people, I don't fit in with white people, just always kind of teetering which side to go to. So Amber, can you give a brief overview of racial identity development and discuss ways parents can help their children as they move across the stages?
Right. So before I answer this, I have to take a moment of gratitude to folks that have helped me answer this. I only have the answer to this question because other people have helped me find it. I don't have some magical, bank in this brain of mine. But something that I've been doing a lot lately, thanks to some friends of mine, is just listening to adult transracial adoptees. As a white adoptive parent and with a transracially adopted child, I've been a part of a wonderfully honest group of folks that have bared their souls to current parents, kind of saying, here's some missteps that my parents had. Please don't make these mistakes with your kids. So what I'm sharing really isn't even of of my own knowledge. It's just things that I've been learning from adult transracial adoptees. And one of the biggest things that has been taught to me on making sure that racial identity is happening is making sure in our house, how we're doing this, really making sure that my child has racial mirrors, that making sure they're not growing up completely isolated, only surrounded by white people. And this, racial identity has to be incredibly intentional for most white adoptive parents. It means going out of your comfort zone every once in a while, doing new things, going to new places, but you have to do it for the health of your children, for the mental health of your children. It's imperative, making sure that my son has people in his life that also look like him, and that not everybody that comes in our house only looks like mom and dad, right? Seeking out Black doctors, seeking out Black dentists, visiting Black businesses, having diverse literature, having diverse media, whether it's movies and music, art. This year was the Christmas where we diversified our Christmas decorations, right? And every year just really being intentional and making sure that my son, I would be heartbroken if my son reached 18 years, 19 years of age, leaves the house and is like, wait a minute, there are authors and musicians and, artists that aren't white. Like if he grows up that way, I would have failed him tremendously. And so making sure that he has racial mirrors as much as possible, I think is incredibly important in making sure that he forms his own racial and cultural identity.
I love that, racial mirrors, because representation is very important. They need to be able to see themselves in other successful Black men and women so that they can see that they can too be that too, and not be bombarded with what the media is trying to portray what is Black culture. So I love that. So here's this question. This is for all of you. How has raising Black children made you aware of white privilege or more aware of it?
I'll jump in on this one. My husband and I have talked about this before where, there have been many times when our daughter, our Black daughter, has, thrown tantrums in public, and my husband's, scooped her up crying and left the grocery store, the park, with a screaming toddler. And we've thought about how, people just look at him as, oh, what a good dad, doting dad, taking care of his daughter. And we thought about, what if their races were reversed? What if people saw a Black man carrying a screaming white little girl outside of the store? What the ramifications of that would be, his safety. It's you've got to look at things from a completely different lens than what you're used to. And that's really kind of struck us as one example that we're safe in that regard. He's safe in that regard.
Yeah, I can totally agree. That's it. We're safe. Like when we go out on our own, we're white women with brunette or blonde hair. But when you have your children with you or someone of a different race, all of a sudden the situation changes. Things are looked at differently. But you didn't look at me like that before, so why is that necessary now? So you're really aware to these different events that happen.
Yeah, I think mine will be short. These ladies did an amazing job answering that. I see it more frequently than I used to. Like I've always was aware of it, but I think it catches my attention more frequently now. And maybe that's just, having more reflection or reading a little bit more or listening to the stories of my friends, and having moments where I hear a story from a Black or brown friend of mine and going, that has never, ever happened to me. And, and I feel like I'm having more of those situations come up as people, maybe those friendships grow deeper, and the authenticity there is in bearing some of their stories and heartaches, and really, really kind of heinous situations that they've been in before that really sometimes they shouldn't be shocking to me, but sometimes honestly they still are. So I'm like, how on earth have you had this story in your soul and I didn't know as your friend, and so I think more frequently now it's just more aware.
Yeah. So this question is for Rosie and Amber. You both have adopted Black children and you're raising children that you have birthed. How are you talking to your biological children about race?
Yeah, so, I mean, starting at a young age, our biological daughter, we always had a lot of children's literature with Black historical figures, Ruby Bridges and Harriet Tubman, and we just always had a lot of that, and we often had conversations about race. And now that my daughter is 9.5, we can have those conversations about current events too, the protests, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, just, she's very, very aware. And it's important that we have these conversations, not because we have a responsibility of helping to form a good citizen, but because she has a Black sister and, she's going to have her back. And at the end of the day, they fight and bicker, but if someone looks sideways at Summer, my older daughter, her claws are out. And, it's important that they see as well, so that they can be an ally and an advocate for their sibling.
Yeah, that's good. So my, Rosie, I don't remember, how old was your oldest?
She's 9.5 and then 4.
Okay, so our kids are really similar in their age.
Yeah.
So I have 2 boys,
Okay.
10 and 3. And my oldest son is very tender and very sweet and very much a protector of his brother. Like you said, when you said the claws would come out, I was like, I felt that. So when I remember, and this was before Ahmaud Arbery, there was another story that had been on the news maybe 6 months prior to that, that didn't get as much media attention, but Noah heard it, I think, and it kind of sparked a conversation. And I realized that he thought that the conversations we had been having on race were all historical, because he knew, like during Black History Month, we would read a book together, or things that he would learn in school. I think when he was in kindergarten, they watched that cartoon, My Friend Martin. And, so even when he was 5, he's having, some questions. But somehow this is the year that something switched where he's like, what do you mean? This is still a thing,
right?
And even his 10-year-old self, I'll say, to protect his privacy, I will not tell you what it said, but he was so amped up. I was like, you need to start writing. You need to start writing this down. He started a journal and wrote some things that were so full of, I would say, holy fire for the wrongs. And he was baffled, right? Like, because he understood it at his age at 10 from a historical perspective, but honestly thought like, oh, we closed that door. So what we're doing now this year is like, I've had to say, baby, this door has stayed open and it never closed. Because then he thought maybe it just reopened, right? The door was closed, but it just kind of cracked back open. And we're like, no, honey, I'm so sorry, but this is still a thing. So even this week, we just ordered Dr. Kendi's Stamps from the Beginning and then Stamped the Remix, the young adult version. So we're going to read that one together. You know, we've just been having a lot of good heart-to-heart conversations, you know, putting the screens away, putting the phone away, and just saying, ask anything. Even if you need to use language that usually mommy doesn't allow you to use, you can ask anything and say anything, and I will tell you. So that he can be an ally or a co-conspirator, Dr. Gina, he can be a co-conspirator for his brother, because I need him not only to stand up for his brother, that's a given. I need him to stand up for everyone.
Right.
You know, his friends that are outside of our house, not just his brother.
Right.
That's good. That's good. So here's a follow-up question to that for Rosie and Amber. How are you exposing your adopted children to their cultural heritage?
Yeah, that's kind of a constant everyday conversation. And we, you know, as a 4-year-old, you're a little limited in, you know, going to the African American History Museum in DC and going to Africa or what have you. But we, you know, having bringing her to a Black salon or having a Black woman working on her hair, or you know, constant mirroring and representation, like Amber said, you know, preschool teachers or doctors, or you know, having that representation, and also a lot of literature, and you know, as much as we can get a hold of, our house is kind of covered with it. So and also the kind of a exciting thing is that we're seeing a lot more of you know, Black Santa and whatnot, like Amber mentioned. So you know, it's just a constant. It's a constant paying attention and effort in that department.
That's good.
Yeah, working on the mirrors, always working on the mirrors for my son in literature and movies, you know, things that are age appropriate. My kid's 3, so there are some that are just gonna have to wait a little bit. But okay, everyone watching is gonna every non-white person watching this is probably gonna go, oh boy. So you know what I'm really trying to learn how to do? Don't laugh. I am really seriously like trying to learn how to cook good soul food.
Oh, Amber, call me. I'm coming over.
Okay, so I have it down here.
Listen, Amber, let me tell you, the number one rule is there's no true measurements, okay? You just pour until the ancestors say, stop, my dear. That's when you know, like, that is some good seasoning.
So I need to like tell Nick's like ancestors to send me the help. I need the help because I don't have that. I was that.
Oh, Amber, I'm coming over. I'm gonna come over and share some dishes with you.
I need help. So last year we started celebrating Juneteenth in my house, and it was a big holiday last year. This year I ended up working on Juneteenth, and I was really kind of irritated about it because it should be a federal holiday, but that's another conversation. But last year I wasn't working on Juneteenth, so we did a whole big thing about it. We got all the books from the library and watched videos about it, and I tried my hand at greens, and I don't know if I did it right, but I tried so hard. And so things of wanting to incorporate culture into our household, but with the very, in all seriousness though, it's a fine line, because I also want to make sure as a white woman, there's no cultural appropriation, right? So knowing that it's really important for my son to be exposed to things, and as his mom, I want to give him those experiences and those opportunities, but it's also a fine line in wanting to make sure, and I don't know if you can appropriate food or not, you know, usually I see that in like dress and vernacular and hair, but it's something that I've always been trying to be really careful about. And wanting to expose, but also being very conscious to not appropriate that as either, though, as a white woman. So that's something, it's a work in progress, but I'm trying to make some soul food. I need some help.
I'm coming over. We're gonna summon the ancestors.
I'm jealous.
Rosie, I sent you some recipes.
Yes.
Just
Okay.
pour.
I don't want to come to Phoenix right now. Not with these temps.
Tracy, so how are you talking to your children about race, you and your husband?
Oh, like they said, incorporating everything. I mean, my children have never been around just one type of person. I want them to walk into school and see other African Americans that are educated, that are intelligent. I want them to walk into the barbershop and understand what culture can be like in different areas. I want them to understand anything from food, and that's not just like black or white. That's I practice Chinese medicine. I practice, all these different cultures. They need to understand all cultures, especially their own, of course, but really encouraging them to be proud of who they are in every form. Just absolutely, like, you should be, being black is amazing. Like, you need to understand how great this is. And I cannot rely on my husband to do that. They need to see that from their white mother. You should be so thankful and so proud that you're black. I'm Swedish. You should be so proud you're Swedish. Like, take all of this and use it and love it, because media will tell you one thing and another man or woman is going to tell you another, but you know who you are. And in our house, you are a child of God, and this is who you are meant to be. And so they have a great platform to use, I think, as biracial children, to go, I'm this and I'm that. And it's all wonderful, and to use every bit of it. And so it's encouraging it, seeing their white mother encouraging maybe that other side that maybe I'm not, but that they are. And then also seeing their father, obviously it's easier for me because they have a black father who can, expose them to things, but it's just having them out in every realm and really understanding how important culture is in every way.
That's good. And I love this conversation because a lot of things that you are saying as mothers, I am doing the same thing with my daughter. I do diversity work, so I'm intentional of making sure that she is exposed to other cultures and appreciate other cultures, but I have to work extra hard in an anti-Black world to make sure that she appreciates her own skin. And so I'm loving this awareness that she has about what it means to be Black. We've had conversations about the recent murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and to see her like come into like an understanding of what it is. She even told me, she said, she texted her friend that lives in Texas on the 4th and said, yeah, we don't celebrate the 4th of July. We don't do that anymore. And she's like explaining to her why. And I'm like, okay, I love that you have no awareness and you're learning about this. So it's the intentionality about parenting and not allowing media, social media, what they see on Disney Channel, on YouTube, to try to shape that for them. Like, we have to be intentional about the messages that we're interrupting and those mirrors that we're trying to put in front of them. I love it. So this question is for all of you. Considering the racial context of our country, what are your fears of raising Black children?
I think, and I would assume that this is parents, mothers and fathers around the country. I think a parent's worst nightmare is burying their children. When I didn't have a Black son and only had a white son, that fear was still there, but that fear was, Lord, please protect my son from cancer, right? Please protect my son from getting hit by a drunk driver. No parent on this planet ever wants to bury their children. My children will bury me, right? That's the most devastating thing I think any parent could think of. And now that I also have a Black son, all of the fears that I have with my white son of never ever wanting to bury my children, the list is longer, right? So the list is still there. Lord, please protect my youngest son from cancer. Please protect my youngest son from never getting hit by a drunk driver. But the other things that also keep me awake on that list are, Lord, please protect my son from someone having some nonsense in their head that's got a gun and thinks he looks dangerous when he's going to buy a pack of Skittles down the street at the gas station. Lord, protect my son against walking, in the park and coming up against somebody that thinks that he looks the profile of someone that is being hunted for by the police right now, and so the fear as a parent of having to bury your children, I think, is universal, but the list of reasons why you might have to bury your children is just a little bit longer when you have a Black one.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there are so many fears that you have as a parent, but specifically to my Black child, it's, bias. The list goes on: bias in the school, psychological well-being and dealing with everything that's going on, peer maltreatment, maltreatment from teachers. It goes on. And as much as you want to keep them in a cocoon of safety, and you don't want to address these issues because it's really heartbreaking to talk about it to your child, you're not doing them any favors if you don't talk about these things, and if they don't realize that it's a reality, because they will go out into the world, and you don't want them to learn the hard way. You want them to be prepared that people are going to see them differently than they see themselves or we see them. And there is bias, there's hate, there's racism. It's a reality. And as much as I fear even the conversations, it's absolutely pivotal for their safety.
Yeah, totally agree. That safety is a huge worry. I think I worry about it more for my son than my daughter. As my son gets older, that's when you start praying over them differently. And you're not so afraid of them falling down and cracking their head. You're afraid of, what if he gets pulled over when he starts driving? What if this happens? And it's also educating them, though, that in our house, we always say, it's not what if it happens, it's when it does. And this is how you have to react when it does happen. When this person says something, when this teacher does this, even though a lot of people around them want to deny, oh, it's not racism, it's not this, but you have to really prepare your children, because you can't guard them as much as we want to guard them and be mama bears all the time. They have to understand when it happens and you're not around, how to react, but to be educated enough to know this will happen and this is what we do. But making sure that they're grounded. They have to be grounded in who they are and knowing what they're supposed to be doing, and just everything, just truly grounded.
Yeah. So this question is for all of you. I know that when people see you and your family out, there are some assumptions that are made. When I'm out with my daughter, you guys know my daughter, she's very light skinned, light complected. She gets her color from both her grandmothers. She has really tight curly hair. And so people assume when she's with me that her dad is white. And so people will come up to me and some of the things people say to me, I'm like, thank God I got the Holy Ghost. In Walmart, checking out, thank God I have the Holy Ghost, because I really just want to go off on you. So I know that if I am receiving those assumptions, you guys are. So what are some of the assumptions people are making about your family when they see you out?
I'll start. Assumptions are the biggest word of our lives. There's assumptions about everything. I think when people see me with biracial children, they assume I'm not married. I think I get that all the time. They assume, oh, she has Black children, she's not married. I get that all the time. And I try to keep my mouth shut and just go, oh, if they only knew their father. If they only knew their father, he's the best, he's the most perfect father in the world. If they only knew, but sometimes you just have to, when they make comments or say things. So I think there's just so many assumptions about money too. They assume maybe you don't have a lot of money, or we were talking about being a savior, you saved these kids or something like that. When I'm out with my husband, you know, I get a lot of assumptions. People always think I make more money than him because he's Black. They'll always say, well, since you make the most money in the household, and you know exactly why they're saying that or why they think that. It's solely for that reason. So there's always assumptions in the family.
Yeah, I had so many people after after we adopted Summer come up to us and say, "Did you watch This Is Us?" And I'm like, "Oh, no, but okay." Like they could identify because they watch a show about that. Anyways, yeah. So I think the most assumptions, well, I don't know what everyone's thinking, but a lot of assumptions that we do get are thinking that we will be raising our daughter white and being very surprised when they see how fired up and passionate we are about racial injustice and matters of race. And I think they think it's just so much easier to raise them like me, you know, or my husband. It would be so much easier. But like we've talked about before, that's a huge detriment to the child. And so definitely assumptions on, you know, or that we're going to raise our child colorblind. Like that's a good thing. So definitely assumptions along those lines for us.
Something that's immediately dropping out at me might be a little bit more geared toward my son than us as a family unit, but I think they think this because he has white parents. I have, honest to goodness, lost count of the number of times someone has asked me like, "Oh, was he a drug baby?" Like this kind of look like, "Oh, was his mom on drugs?" And listen, talk about the claws coming out, right?
Yeah.
No, not that it's anybody's business, but no. But I mean, you know exactly where that's coming from, right? No one has ever asked if my son was born addicted to drugs, like, but people ask all the time. Asked if he was 1 week old when people started asking me, like, "Oh, did you adopt him because his mom was on drugs?" Like, it blows my mind. I've literally lost count at how many people have asked me that about my son. Number one, it's so inappropriately invasive. Sometimes because I'm sassy, I'll just be like, "Are you on drugs? Like, why do you think that's an okay question to ask me?" But you know,
I love you, Amber.
anyways, but I get that a lot, and it comes back to this assumption of, oh, look at this Christian white lady adopting this Black, you know, child, and then their own kind of white savior complex starts being pushed in, and they're thinking like, "Oh, you did such a good thing." Like, oh my gosh, no. Adoption is messy and broken, and it's very traumatic, and there's grief and there's loss for a child when they are adopted and they're not with their birth family and their birth culture. It's hard. And the assumption that we're some like magical fairy princess that came in and saved the day is disgusting. You know, but I think that's the assumption that I noticed the most with ours.
Yeah. So here's a question that I'm sure my Black audience wants to know. How did you learn to care for your child's skin and hair?
This is just funny because just the other day, someone asked me, they were dressing Summer, my daughter, and they said, "So do you curl her hair every day?" And I was like floored. I mean, I was just floored. But then I remember like 12 years ago having a conversation with you, Regina, and I was incredibly naive and I'm just kind of embarrassed at what I used to think and or what I didn't know. And you told me that Beyonce's hair was not her real hair. And I was shocked. I did not know that. I called my sister and I was like, "I know Beyonce's hair isn't her real hair." And it's just, I look back at that so naive and so in kind of a bubble to now where, you know, I can't tell you how many hours I've spent on YouTube or, you know, researching products. I've definitely had help from Black women teaching protective styles. My littlest sister has gotten really passionate about it. And she loves to help out with her hair too. But definitely there are really good Facebook groups on hair, Black hair, and for sure, you know, getting out of your comfort zone and going to a Black salon or asking a Black person for help, you know, because it's really important, really, really important.
Rosie, I remember that conversation about
Oh my gosh.
But I also remember texting you when you had your baby, when Summer, and I was like, listen, don't have that baby out in the street ashy. Put some Vaseline and lotion on her in the winter time. You don't want her out there ashy.
And that's stuck with me. She does not, first thing when she wakes up, we get the lotion out for sure.
Oh man. So my son was born with a head full of hair straight away. And so I agree with Rosie that I'm trying to like learn all the things and read everything on the internet, but at the end of the day, the internet is not what helped me. And so as his hair developed, when he was maybe 1.5 and his curl pattern started coming in, I started to see that he has 4C hair.
Come on and know the textures. 4C.
It's 4C. I did the water test and everything like the internet told me to. I was investigating. And then every product I tried that the internet told me to try was like not cutting it. So what I did was I just reached out to a friend of mine that I was pretty confident had 4C hair. It was a male with longer hair. Hey, Zach Gillis, you know, and I sent him a message on Instagram and I was like, Zach, I'm pretty sure his hair is 4C. It appears your hair might be 4C. At the time, Nick's hair was much longer because he was really scared of the sound of the clippers and the feel of the clippers. So I had taken him to a Black barbershop, but he was just really scared of it. He was little, and so we were growing it out, and I loved it grown out. I thought it was amazing, but it required extra care. And I said, Zach, is this the right product? What am I doing? And sweet Zach came over with a little Target bag, and he was like, "Here you go." And it was super, super helpful. But I think a lot of that comes down to just being a humble person and not acting like you know it all and not acting like you know everything, not just about hair and skin, but about culture, and just having a humble heart and saying, I need help, and I'm not ashamed that I need help, and I'm not going to put myself on a pedestal to know everything, and just ask. And hopefully already before you adopted children, have people in your life that were your friends before you needed this advice. Don't go asking people for hair care advice just because you need hair care advice, but have good support that you can reach out to, and have friends already that you can reach out to and say, no.
That's my Rocco.
Yeah.
Aww.
Hi, Rocco.
I would say that the skin and hair for me is fun because it's not, I'm not dealing with this maybe like super straight hair, because I have super straight hair, and I'm like, can I get somebody with some body? Can I get some kids that have some good fun hair? And my kids have a real happy medium, hair, and so it's not difficult for me to do. But I exposed myself to stuff so early. I felt like I was like 12 years old braiding girls' hair. Like I was involved with every kind of culture, and it just was not difficult to me. And when my son was born, it was pretty easy. I'm the one who's like, do not leave the house until your knees look good. Do not even walk out of the house. And my husband is the one who doesn't do that. And then I'm the one who takes him to the barbershop. My husband does not. I'm the one who does that. So it's kind of funny. You would think everyone assumes the roles are reversed, but I'm the one who's like really picky on how their hair looks. And I'm like, no, I took nothing against white hair salons. They're great at my hair, but I take my son there and he walks out and I'm like, oh no, this will absolutely not do. And I have to go redo it because I'm like, this is not how I want his hair done. But so I think it's not hard. I think when my daughter was born, I did have to do a lot of trial and error. Like, does anyone know of some good cream that's like this, or some moisturizer find like the right thing for her hair. But I love the skin and hair. I do have a real pet peeve when people touch my kids' hair
Yes.
because they
Yes.
do it a million times a
Yes.
day. Nobody touches my hair, but they
Right.
touch my kids' hair, and then we have an issue because I'm like, they didn't go grab your head.
Right.
Why do you think you can go grab their head? And it's like, obviously they're just oblivious to any kind of anything different from themselves because they're like, oh my gosh, curls. I'm like, have you never seen curls? Is this new to you? Like, and so I have to explain to a lot of people that you don't go touch their hair. It was just done. I just did it. Don't touch it.
Right.
So hair is a big subject for our children, I think, and we have to learn how to help other people address their interest in their hair that you can't go touching and you can't go feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a constant conversation in my house with my daughter, and just teaching her that she has agency over her own body. So to say, if someone reaches for your hair, just, say, no, don't touch my hair. And it's not rude of you to say it. It's rude for them to put their hands in your head. So I'm teaching her that to be bold at saying, no, you can't touch my hair. Because they're little, because they're thinking like, oh, I'm being rude or I'm being bad. I'm like, no, you have agency of your own body. You tell them, don't touch me.
Right.
That's rude.
I love that. That's a perfect rule. Let people know it's not rude, but they have to let people know, or people would be all touching them, and it'd be different for them. You have to let them know how to go. I didn't do that to you. Please respect my space and don't do that to me.
Yeah.
Right. And apart from it being just not appropriate behavior, there is nothing worse than someone coming and like rubbing their head right after you've done their style. I mean, it's really, really gets my goat.
Yeah, that's a fighting move for me growing up. Like, don't touch my hair. We're fighting now. So ladies, what has been the greatest lesson learned about raising Black children?
That's a good question.
Yeah, for me, I feel like I have such a broader scope and ability to empathize, and I think a lot of people who, if you don't look like the other person, or you didn't grow up like the other person, or you're just from a different area or region or whatever, you don't have the same level of empathy. And having a Black child has really, really kind of expanded our ability to really walk in someone else's shoes and empathize and be aware. And that's been really rewarding for me as a person. And it's due to wanting what's best for our daughter and loving our daughter so much. So yeah, I would say that's been a big thing for me.
Regina, are you asking the lesson for me, or I just want to make sure I'm answering
For you.
Okay.
For you.
Thank you for your answer first, Rosie, because I think I was about to answer it totally wrong. For my own kind of interpersonal growth, something that I've noticed, just by nature, I tend to be a bit of a perfectionist and a people pleaser. And my personality as a whole, I get very uncomfortable or get kind of anxious when I don't know something, way more than I should. It's something that I've always kind of struggled with. And I cannot be a perfectionist on knowing the lived experience of my friends who are Black and brown. I cannot be an expert. I don't have the life experience. I don't experience the prejudice. That's not something that I experience. So I can't always know it. And at first it really bothered me, to be honest, because I so badly wanted to know and wanted to understand. But I think kind of unearthing and even recognizing why I was struggling so much with not understanding some things was a moment of kind of transformation for just my own soul, and acknowledging my own humanity and being okay with that, and being able to just take a step back and going, it is okay as a human being to not always know all the things and to not always have the answers. And that's something that is really hard for me in all areas of my life. But I feel like it made itself more apparent after I became the mother to my Black son, and having to acknowledge and own that and reconcile that, and be at peace with that, so that I could grow honestly and openly, to best parent him.
That's good.
Yeah, I definitely think it keeps opening your eyes every day. I mean, growing up, most of my friends were of all different cultures, but you think you know and you understand, but even now that you have children, or I have a Black husband, I think that your eyes are still opened every single day. Even as much as you think you know, there's still more for your own self to grow, and there's more for you to learn. You can't stop learning. You can't stop educating your children. But it also gives you a really great platform to speak to other people about it, to help them to understand. And you can still ask questions to other people and learn, as you go, but it's just a constant process. But it does allow you, as you see more, to be able to help others, to educate and to grow. And I think our children have a wonderful place into people, especially white people's lives that have never been exposed to anything different than what they know. For them to see those children and fall in love with them and go, they're so amazing. Maybe I was a little wrong by judging this kind of person, or, things like that. So I think it's a great educational tool almost to be able to teach others.
So my final question for you all. So Amber and Rosie, what advice would you give white parents raising non-white children? And Tracy, what advice would you give parents with biracial children?
I would say that if you as a parent are ill-equipped, then your child is going to be ill-equipped. And you as a parent need to put in the work, and you need to surround yourself with people of color, and you need to be up on aware of racial issues going on, because if you aren't, and if you're not talking about it with your child, then they're going to experience it on their own, and they don't have the safety net of the proximity to whiteness. And that if you're not preparing them, and if you're not surrounding them with representation, they're going to end up with an identity crisis, and they're going to end up with an inability to cope when confronted with issues of racism. So I think you really need to push yourself past your comfort zone when thinking about adoption, and it constantly, every day, as after you've adopted. It's an ongoing learning for you, for the betterment of your child.
That's good.
Something that I have not experienced yet because our son is so young, but one of the recurring themes that I'm seeing with the transracially adopted adults that have so graciously spoken into my life as a mother is that a lot of them experienced parents that brushed off the children's exposure with racism, or, if the child came home and said, hey, the teacher said this, or, hey, I was at the store and the lady kept following me around. Hundreds of them repeatedly are telling stories about their white parents just kind of like, oh, I'm sure it wasn't that, and they would feel like they were being targeted, but their white parents were like, oh, don't make it about race. And time again, adult transracial adoptees have taught me that the best thing a white parent can do, so this is again gratitude to others, not from me, but the best thing you can do is believe your children, and they're not exaggerating anything. And the problem of racism is exceptionally significant and something that they're experiencing day in and day out, and it's not blown out of proportion. There's actually a lot of research about from Ivy League institutions talking about when someone discloses an abuse, when someone discloses a trauma and they are not believed, the odds of them developing PTSD, depression, anxiety triple. And we're seeing some mental health concerns with transracial adoptees whose parents did not address it and did not believe them. So I'm just passing on wisdom that was given to me that we very much look, to implement in our household, that that hopefully if you're a potential adoptive parent that you will implement in yours too.
Tracy?
Yeah, biracial children, they are a beautiful thing because we're seeing more and more of them. It was almost like rare, right? At one point in time, or it wasn't okay. And now you look at like many NFL players and you're like, they've got to be biracial, so we're just seeing a lot more biracial or interracial marriages and biracial children. And it's an awesome thing. But I think as a white mother or white father, you need to really prepare them. Don't expect your spouse or the other, parent to prepare them. Make sure you are preparing them for what they're going to face. And unfortunately, sometimes that's from both sides. When sometimes coming from Black people, they're not Black enough, but then most of the time coming from white people, they're too Black. So you've got both these sides that you have to teach. You have to teach your children how to cope with and how to react. And I would say, be careful how you react. Every way you react, your children will feed off of that. So if something like she was just saying, if something racial happens and you know what it is, don't deny it. Don't act like it's not happening. Address it. Let your children see you address it, especially if you're talking about biracial children and you're white. You need to address it. You need to make sure your family is ready for that, extended family. And they need to see you react in a positive way though. So you have to always, I'll be the crazy mom. And sometimes I have to step back and be like, okay, I'm not going to be the crazy mom today because, my kids are watching me. So just making sure they're ready for the real world, but you are educated as well to know what's going to happen and how to address different situations. Because a lot of people like to look at me and go, oh, your children are so beautiful. You don't probably deal with anything. And you just smile and nod like, yeah, they have no idea. They have no idea. So it's just really, again, continuing to educate your spouse, your children, and then everybody from there.
This was so good, ladies. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your knowledge with my audience. For those of you who are watching, please make sure that you share this video. Let us know how you enjoyed this conversation. And then join me back next week. You guys have asked for this, and so I'm going to give it to you. We're going to do our white allies and co-conspirators panelists again, and this time with the Q&A. So if you have questions that you want the panel to answer next week, feel free to inbox me those questions. Thank you, ladies, so much. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good night, everyone.
You too. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.